Hello, Daniel from growyourmusicstudio.com. During the month of June, I am teaching and revealing exactly what I've learned during the last 15 years about teaching group lessons. And to kick that off, in this video today, I'm releasing an interview with a very good friend of mine, Greg Genter. This is the fellow who I originally co-wrote the summer camp curriculum that kind of kicked off my career. In this interview, we go into great depth about a lot of topics. I will tell you, this was originally a 50-minute interview, and I cut it down to 35 minutes, just because I took out a few places where we meandered and maybe where we just told some stories. What I left in, though, was extremely powerful stuff. We go into great depth about a lot of topics that I think you'll be interested about. For instance, Greg talks about how he fired 70 students in one day and still managed to keep studio revenues the same. That's pretty cool. A couple other things. Actually, there's so many I wrote them down, and I'm just going to kind of read them through right here. Experiences from our first few years of teaching group and exactly what we learned. What Greg did to actually increase the quality of his studio and actually begin to produce from his group program state-level competition finalists. You know, I think there's some misconceptions around group that it is somehow inferior to one-on-one teaching and that you can't produce a good product out of a group program. It is just not true. Greg and I are living proof of that. What happens when you say yes to demanding parents and the kinds of problems that breeds in your studios? The kinds of things you need to know to set up a good group program, logistically speaking. How to market a group studio. We go into a lot of depth here. I think there's a lot to learn if you are serious about improving a group program, starting a group program. So without further ado, enjoy this conversation that Greg and I had. All right. Hey, this is Daniel at growyourmusicstudio.com. And for the past year, I've written quite a bit on my blog about the way that I've done lessons and my background in group teaching and how I got that start. And every time that I have mentioned, my background in group teaching and how I got my start, there's always been one person that has come up in that conversation, and that person is Greg Genter. And today, Greg and I are going to have a conversation about the last almost decade and a half that we've worked together, the curriculum that we co-wrote together, and what he has done over the last 10 years to really make an innovative program in his town of Ashburn, Virginia. So anyway, thanks for having a conversation with me, Greg.
Yeah, man, definitely. So it's going to be great.
Many times on my blog, I've given background on what I did to kind of start the way that I teach group. What would be really interesting now is to kind of give your background and what you've been up to and, what you do as a piano teacher.
Okay, so as of right now, I only teach piano. In the past, I've been asked to teach guitar, drums, voice, and I've said yes to all those things, and I did okay, but I've learned more and more that I need to specialize in my strongest expertise, and so I strictly teach piano at this point. My time, I was just doing some math, and I found out that my time is almost perfectly evenly divided between teaching private lessons and teaching group lessons. And I teach 1 hour private lessons, and it takes 16 hours of my week. So 16 hours a week I'm working with private students. For the other 16 hours of the week, I run small groups for beginners, and I also manage sizable studio, so I have other teachers working with me. But in those 16 hours, me and my team, we see 235 students a week. And so that ends up being right at about 250 students a week that I see. The vast majority of them are in these group lessons. My private lessons are only open to intermediate and advanced students. And my group lessons are only open to elementary level students.
What about your group students though?
My group students, they are students who they start out, they've never played the piano before. Okay. Yeah, we could definitely get in later about, exactly what makes our group lesson special. It has been a big hit here in Ashburn. And actually, I can give part of the story now. You want to know about my background.
Yeah.
So I started playing piano, Daniel. Do you know how old I was? Have I ever told you? I think you were 7. Were you 7?
No, I was 4.
See, I was 4 too. All right, so we don't know anything about each other. All right, so I started playing the piano when I was 4 years old, and then I started actually learning how to teach as in my young teens. When I was 13, the church that I was going to got me connected with a like a summer Bible club kind of thing, and I actually went to some rigorous training. I lived in the state of Pennsylvania, and that summer when I was 13, they sent me away for 2 weeks to Lancaster Bible College, and as a 13-year-old, I took a college level course on how to hold the attention of a small group of children, how to take complicated ideas and break it down into simple words so kids can understand. And of course, the material was religious material, not music material. But I started to learn how to and get comfortable working with small groups at age 13. And I went back every year. So my summers, all the way through my teens, looked like this. I had 2 weeks at Lancaster Bible College, reviewing and the idea of how to work with kids. And then all summer long, I was doing like vacation Bible schools and backyard Bible clubs for kids, and really got confident working with groups, so that was my background as a kid. I felt like I developed as a pianist and as a teacher, but the funny thing is I really was convinced that I was going to grow up to be a composer and performer. I really didn't think I was going to grow up to be a music teacher, because you're young, you're foolish.
Let me ask you a question. There's just this growing curiosity, and I'm seeing it more and more this year, 2017, than I did last year. There's a growing curiosity with the idea of group lessons. And, tell me a little bit more about your group lesson program. Maybe tell me a little bit more about what got you into group lessons. You were kind of mentioning there in that last part that you got comfortable with groups, but maybe what are some of the earliest experiences you had as
Sure.
as a teacher teaching groups? And you don't necessarily have to name any music stores, because we're not going to give them any free publicity, but
no, that's fine. No, I can do it. My experience as a teacher, piano teacher, when I decided, okay, I live in a suburban community full of kids. It's going to be really easy to make a living as a piano teacher. Those were my thoughts going into business. It took me 9 months to get my first 5 students. So yeah, real good living. But sooner or later, I started getting more and more students. My plate started to get full. But I was driving house to house, and I was teaching one at a time. I started to feel, and I know I follow a lot of piano teacher threads, and I felt the same way a lot of other teachers feel. I'm saying the same thing over and over and over, house to house, student to student. This is a line, this is a space, that's a step, over and over. And 90% of my students were beginners, and I was like, man, these kids would make so much better progress if I could just all at once teach them to read music. And I know that the best way to learn to read music is immersion. The best place to learn Spanish is Spain. And so I just thought, wouldn't it be nice, the way in the old times, if you wanted your child to learn piano, you would send them away to live with an apprentice.
Yeah.
And that child would do like all the housework and the gardening, and then they would be basically in a conservatory. And I think one of the early light bulbs that went off in my head, I was actually working with an etudes book, and I was working one-on-one with a student, and it was Barron's or one of these guys that wrote one of these etudes books, and the title of the book was 25 Easy Studies for the Early Pianist. And the piano student that I was working with was in their 4th year. They had already finished method books, and I'm like, what was going on back then? And really, the issue is children learned how to read music in an immersion setting, and so their whole education just was fast tracked. And so I was like, man, it would be great. All these kids that I'm driving house to house to, if I could just take them to live at my house. I thought I could get it done in a week. I could certainly teach that a line to a space is a step. If I had a week to talk about nothing else, I thought I could probably get that home. and of course I can't bring kids to my house. That would be a little weird in our culture.
Yeah.
Then the idea of a summer camp, I was like, yes, summer camp would work. And of course, I didn't want to do it all myself, and I don't really trust my brain because I have especially at the time I wasn't a detail person. I didn't feel like I could put a whole curriculum together, so I called my best friend.
Well, who was that? Who was that?
There was Daniel Patterson, and we worked on that curriculum. We put a summer camp curriculum together to teach beginners how to read music. You've never played the piano. We were going to teach you to read and play a bunch of simple songs in a week, and we did. We were imagining, because we knew we had the best idea ever. We imagined we were going to get 1,000 students our first year.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's what we thought. We got 7. You remember? Seven students. All 7 of those kids learned to read music. Yeah. It happened. We watched, even though our numbers were bad, our margins were horrible. We lost a lot of money. We spent more in advertising than we got back in enrollments. But the program worked. The idea worked, and so I knew that I was onto something, and I was going to work as hard as I needed to work. I was going to wait out as long as I needed to wait out to get this idea to take. So after year 2, year 3, year 4, those are long years, and still we saw no profits. We were spending as much as we were making.
We kept investing back into what we were doing. Yeah,
it was a lot, but our numbers slowly started to grow, and I started to get so many people coming from the camp that wanted lessons with me, that I had no more room. And so the idea of group lessons was starting to dawn on me. But
as well as I do, we both were kind of, after those first few years, kind of committed to that vision of group lessons. I think we took it in different directions, whereas you kind of went more the music school route, and I wanted to kind of go more of the large private studio route. I mean, and we did that for personal reasons. Obviously, there was no professional problems there. Obviously, we're talking to each other today. Right. But you said something to me, after you started the Piano Express studio, and we had kind of divided your year-round program, and that was separate from our summer camp program. You had mentioned that a couple years ago that you really saw the Express Studio's student quality skyrocket. And I'm curious if you can tell me a little bit more about that. That word skyrocket is a really evocative word. It's very interesting. So I'm curious.
Yeah. I started group lessons, and when I started group lessons, I wanted to avoid all the pitfalls that typically come with group lessons. The way I met, because I never taught group lessons. I imagined that it was a bunch of kids just waiting their turn for the teacher to come around, and then all the other kids are just waiting their turn, and I was like, man, I couldn't in good conscience run group lessons like that. And so I really held back for a long time before I committed to group lessons. And one thing that really kind of tempted me to take the plunge was I started to discover applications in MIDI technology. And we can talk about it more, but actually when I found out that there's pianos that can do all of the assessments, at least write notes and write rhythm, then I was like, oh, so these kids, they don't have to just be waiting their turn. They can have some headphones and they can be working with song files. The songs can be telling them if they're getting the notes right or wrong, and I can be more of just a mediator. And so the vision of how group lessons was gonna work started to take hold.
Yeah.
I only and here's something that also, I had a few students that I knew were gonna be good private students, and I kept them. When I say good, they worked hard and they cared. Okay, if you're not working hard and you don't care, then it robs my joy working with a student like that. And so there were a bunch of students that gave me joy. And back 2011, I was the happiest teacher on the planet. Okay, I was teaching group lessons with technology. It was exactly the way I imagined it would be. I had a bunch of good students. Then, what started to happen in group lessons, Some kids were successful and some kids weren't. And all the teachers watching this, you know that the one factor is at home practice, practice at home. Parents don't necessarily understand that. And so we had a bunch of kids in group lessons. They were saying, well, this isn't working out for us. What we need are private lessons. And so I was a yes person. We're going to talk more about what it really does when you say yes to everything, how that destroys your life. But I was saying yes. If kids wanted a private lesson instead of a group lesson, I would say yes. And so what started to happen is our worst practicers, our lowest achieving students started to fill those spots for private lessons.
Interesting.
And we're talking to teachers, so you know this. Uncommitted students are the first. They are the first to have late payments,
right? Miss
lessons and not want to reschedule. To haggle over, well, we only came to 2 weeks this month. We don't want to pay for all 4. And so we were having horrible logistics. Okay? And my level of private students was really high, and within a year it was stress.
Yeah.
And I knew that I had to make a big change, and it took me, Daniel, it took me another year just to get the courage to make this decision.
I remember.
In one day.
What year was that?
That was 3 years ago, so 2014.
Okay.
Yeah. And so in one day, I told my students, your only option if you're in the method book stage, if you're still an elementary level student, your only option at the Piano Express is group lessons. You can't be a private student if you're not above this level. And we lost 70 students in a day. But the funny thing is we didn't lose any margins because we were paying our teachers just as much as we were making in enrollments. After all of the goofy backwards haggling and complaining and bellyaching the parents gave us, we were only breaking even. So we let go of 70 students, but our margins were still the same.
That's a great business lesson. I don't know if you listen to Tim Ferriss' podcast, but one of the things he said was that oftentimes the bottom 20% of your clients will be 80% of the work. And what's interesting, of course, only a portion of the people listening probably can relate to having a studio of 250 people. But what's really interesting to me is that it ultimately didn't impact your revenue at all. Literally, they were just taking up space and not providing to the business's overall margin.
Right.
Fascinating to me. Okay, sorry.
In fact, there's so many more. So we'll get into it, but when we start talking about reputation, when we start talking about the pianists that we are sending from the studio into the community, saying no at the right time for the right reason is such a good thing. So what happened after that? When I started saying you can only be at an intermediate or advanced level to be a private student, here's what happened. The group lessons for beginners was kind of like a proving ground. The Piano Express, I wrote an original method. It's at this point we have 6 levels completely built out, and it reaches far enough that you can't graduate from those 6 levels unless you're pretty committed. Okay, it goes like method books. You can't get out of the method books into repertoire.
Just out of curiosity, can you give me an idea of that last level in the method? What's that equivalent to in, let's say, Faber Piano Adventures?
Okay, sure. So Piano Adventures, they're level 3. They split level 3 in half, level 3A, 3B. We have a really thick book. We just call our gold level, the gold level. That's probably like we cut off right at 3B.
Okay.
And so we're teaching 16th notes, chord inversions, and really just it's a nice bridge into late elementary, early intermediate repertoire from there. The group lessons were like a proving ground. I could kind of stand back and look at the school and say, oh yeah, here's some really promising students. I'm going to try to see if I can make time in my schedule to work with them when they come through. I could see them coming. I could see them coming a mile away. There's other students that were working hard, and of course I couldn't say yes to everyone. I just don't have enough time. I don't have enough hours in my day.
Sure.
I told you at the beginning of this interview, I have 16 hours that I can commit to private students. So I have to say yes to 16 people and then no to everyone else.
Out of 250.
Yeah. And so I have a network of teachers that I also work with, and I send them referrals all the time. They get a lot of great students from me that are already reading notes and confident and committed. The thing that started to happen to me as a private teacher, and this is important, I started to actually get a lot of experience teaching at the intermediate and advanced levels. Okay. I told you when I was driving house to house, 90% of my time was spent with beginners.
Yeah.
If I would have kept that career model my whole way through, I would be really experienced with beginners. Okay. Now I played a great Beethoven sonata, the Pathetique sonata for my senior recital. You played Franz Liszt the Campanella. I threw roses on the stage. We're great piano, and so many people watching this, you're gonna think I can play advanced music, but you get intimidated teaching, and the reason why is you don't have enough experience. And if you keep saying yes to beginners, you are in essence saying no to that hour of your day to someone more advanced, and that's fine. I evenly divide my time between beginners and advanced students, but I don't want to have a 90-10 split.
Right.
And so the quality of my students started to get better, not just because I was only cherry picking students from my group lessons, although I'm doing that, but in the last couple of years, I've also had so much experience now teaching at that level. I'm really starting to refine and get comfortable with that repertoire. Like when I come to a song that I didn't really know a whole lot about 3 years ago, now I know it inside and out. I can really teach it well. And so, yeah, this year has been a good year for me. I sent all 16 of my students last fall to the Royal Conservatory of Music exams. Okay. And my lowest scoring student was still in the 80s. So it was all, and the way Royal Conservatory works, you pass if you're in the 60s, you pass with honors if you're in the 70s. Pass with, they call it honors with distinction in the 80s, right? Yeah. And then you have to be British to come up with these things. It's first class honors with if you're in the 90s. Wow. And you pass with first class honors with distinction. That's what they say. But all of my students were in those top two tiers, first class honors or first class honors with distinction. I do have a really competitive area that I live in, Northern Virginia. There's a lot of kids here, a lot of teachers. And most recently I sent my students to what they call it the Bach Baroque Festival. It's a Northern Virginia Music Teachers Association thing. It's a division of Music Teachers National Association. 3 of my students made it to the semifinals, and I have never, in all my years teaching, sent anyone to the finals. It's just I couldn't figure out how to get over that wall. But this year, 2 of my students did. So they'll be performing in the honors recital.
Out of how many?
I have to go back and check the numbers. I know that in years past, the numbers have always been over 800. I'm going to estimate that there were, I know there were hundreds and hundreds of students participating. But for this honors recital, there were only 23 students chosen out of that whole batch. And the teachers representing those students there's only 11. So out of all the hundreds and hundreds of teachers here in Northern Virginia, 11 of them are represented in this honors recital. And for the first time, I've been trying all these years to get in that small group, and I feel like I've cracked the code.
See, what I think is interesting about that, oftentimes group lessons are kind of seen as this low class, low commitment, low quality substitute for the primo piano lesson experience, which is one-on-one. So just kind of to summarize, because what do you think, to summarize this kind of this story you've been telling? I mean, what is it that led to you getting there? Why do you think now that after all these years of putting an effort towards getting your students to that level, why now do you think that they've gotten there? And what I heard from you was that it had to do with group lessons. How do you see that, just as a summary idea?
Right. So to put the big picture together, yeah, a lot of other teachers and a lot of parents, they have this belief that group lessons at the beginning, if you build a foundation with group lessons, it's going to lead to something bad. Something bad's going to happen. There's going to be bad note reading, bad technique, bad practice habits, because you're not paying enough attention to the student. They're not getting enough attention. And the fact of the matter is, all of my students now who are, at that elite level, I'm sending them year round to judge in competitive events. They're coming back with highest honors, top, finalist spots.
Yeah, you can't argue with results. Yeah,
and they've all had their foundation in group lessons, and so I, to anyone that's, and I still get people that are suspicious. I get people who are critical, I guess. But I just, what I do is I send them to my Facebook page, because I keep good performances there. I send them to my YouTube channel, to my website. You can't argue with results. And so I just keep pointing people back to results. And as a teacher, how did I position myself to get there? I really think that group lessons helped me free up enough time that I wasn't so disproportionately committed to beginners. I could take more time in my career. And I'll say this, income wise, there is a disproportionate amount that comes from the groups. Right? Reputation wise, there's a disproportionate amount that comes from the private lessons. And so I think that both work together, I think, to help me.
Greg, we have talked about this for years, and in reality, this video is really just letting people in on conversations we've been having for a decade, but I don't know if I've ever heard you say it that way before. And I just wanted to kind of take a minute to think, like, wow, just the idea of being able to focus in on those higher level students because you freed your time up. Because a lot of times, most teachers, when they come to me to work with me or that sort of thing, they're saying, oh, I want to free up time. My kids are getting older. I want to spend more time with them. And of course, you have 3 kids. And, I know that early on when you were building the Express Studio, that you were putting in some insane hours at first, and now you've kind of freed your time up. Not to say that you don't have kids, but what I'm saying is that a lot of times teachers think about that time in terms of personal pleasure or wanting not to teach so much. But you thought that, but you also had this investment mindset too of, I can invest in the quality of my own teaching if I'm freed up. Man, that is just a really forward-thinking way of thinking. And I don't mind telling you in front of the world. So
yeah, no, I'll say that it took me a long, crooked, bumpy road to get to understanding that. I would say to any teachers out there, Daniel, teachers, there's all different personality types that teach, but a lot of us are fixers.
Yeah.
Okay. Fixers like me. I see a problem. I want to run to the rescue and fix it.
Yeah.
That makes me a good teacher, but it makes me a horrible time manager.
Yeah.
I think a lot of teachers get sucked into just saying yes and overcommitting. And of course, you can't give anything if you're running on empty. And so I would say to teachers, don't overcommit yourself. Learn to say no to things that really are just robbing you of joy and taking up your time. I encourage every teacher to just open up time so you can continue to practice. That's another thing. When I was running myself into the ground in those early years, that wasn't necessarily because I was just trying to start up the Piano Express. That's just because I didn't know how to manage time and I didn't know how to say no. It's because I was saying yes to everyone. That was really my problem. But I didn't have time to practice. I could go back to those songs that I tried to play in college and I couldn't play them anymore. I was going backwards as a teacher. And so I want to encourage any teacher watching this video, invest in yourself, invest in your own mind, your own body, your own spirit.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
So we don't have to go into great detail about this, but we've talked about the summer camp that we created together and that you continue to improve. And then kind of when we went our separate ways and I went one direction with group lessons and you went a different direction with the group lessons, you kind of built an ongoing year-round curriculum. Just tell me a little bit about that. It doesn't have to be, super technical or in depth, but tell me a little bit about the Piano Express curriculum.
Sure, of course. Yeah, the Piano Express right now is still a baby. We are still a startup, one location. We are looking to expand. I'm still kind of, as because you're my go-to person when I have questions for business. I'm still trying to make up my mind. Do we franchise? Do I license teachers to run it independently? But I do want to take this curriculum that I've made now and start showing other potential teachers. But yeah, I wrote an original curriculum, right. And I would say, please, any teacher here, don't write an original curriculum unless you absolutely know that there is a need in the world that is not being filled, because it is a tremendous amount of work. Yeah. It's you have to be driven by some thing that just makes you work tirelessly for years. It took me 3 years to write this.
So what I was going to say is, I keep referring to how we kind of went our separate ways, and really the motivation for me going a separate way is I think I'm lazier than Greg. And I from about 2008 to 2011, as you were doing the bulk of this work, or maybe I'm getting the dates off a little bit there, but that 3-year period that you're talking about, I remember we would have phone conversations and you would just tell me the insane hours you were putting in and all the, technological things you were doing. I was a little bit of a punk and would just be like, Greg, you should just do it like I am, man, because I'm only working X number of hours per week. But what you created, which of course I want you to talk a little bit about, but what you created is really, really unique. So yeah.
Right. Right. I think that, I don't know if you're a punk, you're a lot more practical than I am. I am very impractical when it comes to projects. If it's giant, I'm like, yeah, I'll take the next 3 years of my life and work on this one project. It's like, who was the artist? Was it Michelangelo that would spend years on one statue?
Didn't he spend like 16 years in the Sistine Chapel or something like that?
I think, yeah. And then there was some statue of Moses. Yeah, I think someone. I don't know. Anyways, so that was me with the curriculum. But what I wanted that I didn't see anywhere was a curriculum that was built for group lessons. Okay, and it was embracing 21st century technology. Okay, that did not exist. I couldn't find that I tried Faber and Faber. I like Faber and Faber a lot, but they had MIDI files, but at the end of the day, their books were still written for one-on-one lessons, and exactly the format that I wanted to do, it wasn't quite a good enough fit for me. And I also had a personal encounter with Randall Faber, and he told me that he wouldn't appreciate me using his MIDI files for group lessons in a commercial setting. And I was like, yeah, okay, so I'm gonna have to make my own.
Your own curriculum, not just your own MIDI files, but your own curriculum.
Yeah, right. We wrote original MIDI files, MP3 files for every song that we teach. Kids, when they come to their group lessons, they spend the first half of the class, and class is 1 hour, so the first 30 minutes just doing assessment. We don't even try to really teach in the first 30 minutes. They put on headphones and they try to pass their songs, because they're not just hearing themselves when they play, they're hearing a background track of music. It's a MIDI file, it's a song file, playing along with them. And then the pianos that we have, they're high-end digital pianos. They can score the children. It gives them a percentage score. And we just tell them you need to be up over certain to pass the song. And so and when I say we don't try to teach, we do, of course, troubleshoot specific problems. We have people roaming around making sure all the kids are productive and not stuck. But that's not the time in the class where we talk about, in an organized way, theory and technique.
And
so first
something I would jump in there and say is that my experience and your experience, given our past conversations, has been one of, and a lot of teachers find this hard to believe, but I see it in my own studio. I've observed it in yours. I can speak to the veracity of what you're saying, is that using technology, using the group model, and using some of the techniques that as a group teacher you have to develop to teach at a higher level, actually makes it more possible for students to, I think, to learn more effectively, where I know this is true of me, I know it's true of you, that I'm not continually reteaching concepts. I touch things one time and it's done. And so, I just kind of want to jump in there, given that I've seen how the model works, and say that there isn't a lot of teaching that happens during that assessment time, because by and large, kids are just getting it. They're moving on very quickly through their material.
Right. Yeah. For us, we gamify, at the Piano Express, since there's that song file that goes with the song. They can do some self-assessment. They say, well, I got an 80%. Here's what I need to do to get up to 90%. And for children to work semi-independently, I think that's the strongest way for them to learn. If children learn completely independently, then they're out on their own. But if they're very dependent, then they always need the teacher. And it's like, I can't start the song unless someone shows me a hand position. Well, that shouldn't be a second year or third year problem for students.
Right.
But if they're in a group, they have to start to learn to figure those things out for themselves. And it's good. And for a teacher to be there when they're stuck, to get them unstuck. If they're standing in front of a locked door, to help them unlock the door. But when they can solve their own problem, we step back and let them. That's a powerful learning model.
Yeah.